Welcome to Get a Word In, a podcast about content marketing. I'm your host, Adam Walker. I'm passionate about sharing stories and knowledge through content, especially in the form of podcasting. In fact, I co-founded Edgewise.media, a podcast-first marketing content agency. On this show, I interview content marketers at some of the top companies in the world and discover what's working for them, what isn't, and most importantly, what's next. So stay tuned and get ready for some great content about content marketing. Joining me on the show today is Edwin Morris. Edwin, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. I appreciate your patience for getting me through the hoops.
Well, so listen, you've had me on your podcast.
Yep.
Now I'm having you on my podcast. So let's start with what is your podcast? And then what do you do and what do your days look like?
Well, it's pretty interesting. I work in the field of knowledge management. And one of the premier things that we have done in the last 10 years as a young nonprofit is to build a community, global community of listeners and sharers of knowledge through a podcast called Because You Need to Know. And the intent was to bring together learning and perspectives and ideas of people in the field of knowledge management and nonprofit work. So we've got folks from all over the globe that share their information, share their perspective, share their lessons learned in that format. And that's what the podcast is all about.
Yeah, we had a great chat on your show. You asked some very, very good questions. I will probably not do nearly as good a job on this show, but that's okay. This show is a little more focused on marketing, so we'll stick to that genre for the moment. So, all right. So let's start with content marketing. You do podcasts, I do podcasts. Maybe that's your answer, but what's working from your perspective in content marketing right now?
Well, it's interesting that I see organizations that get into the podcast business specifically to make more sales or to expand whatever their business is. Mm-hmm. And really that's the end state for those folks. Yeah. And our perspective, the end state is to enrich somebody's knowledge with somebody else's knowledge. I mean, it's all about connecting and contextualizing what people know. So I think marketing in and of itself is always a slippery slope because the return on investment is always the thing of you're not sure how impactful this is, or are they hearing what we're selling? You know, it's different, I think, in the respect to like retail sales, where you have something on a shelf, advertising helps promote or educate the consumer, right? And your return on investment of that is dollars, period, sales. Right. When you're talking about something that is kind of squishy, like what people talk about, listenership is one thing, right? So, yep, we had 600 listeners on this episode last month. Okay. Right. So what exactly does that mean? Did they listen to 1 minute, 5 minutes, 15 minutes, all of it? Did they put it on while they vacuumed and ignore you? What happened? Ignored the whole thing? Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So the analysis of what is actually being consumed, I think, is the finer question. And my advice for folks that are trying to market a podcast or market themselves is, one, identify the user and how are you going to rate success upon that transaction of the marketing itself. Right. And what would you say about that? I mean, is that something you see?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think ROI with podcast, not ROI, ROI with podcast. So I got outdoors on the brain. Exactly. It's very difficult. So I tell our clients that I actually don't want to measure listens as a first metric. I really want to measure engagement in the content we create and then post on social. Like that's metric number one for me, is like, can we create interesting short videos from the podcast that get engagement on social more than what else you're getting? Like that's number one. Number two for us is driving website traffic back to the podcast page. Right. Are they able to do that from social accounts? And then that helps to grow everything. And then three after that would be like listens, downloads, that sort of thing.
Well, what do you think is the sweet spot for an organization to hit? I know what you said. Don't look at the listens, right? Because it's like a misnomer. Like, we broke 1,000. Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, I think 1,000's great, honestly. Like for most organizations that are not national organizations, I think 1,000's actually a fantastic number of downloads or listens. So that's a really good starting point. I think really the better metric is to say,
Like if you take a short video clip from your podcast and you post it on Instagram, does it get better engagement than the other things you posted? And it should. And if it does not, then why? What do you learn from that? And what do you do different next time?
Yeah.
So
what about titles? What do you think about titles, generating titles for a podcast? Isn't that always fun?
I mean,
so I had a fella from Europe say, what's your method for, like I have a method. What's your method for creating your titles for your podcast? And I'm like, well, I think for the most part, I try to catch a phrase or something catchy within the content and like make that the title. I said, I really don't have a scientific method, but I'm like, are people actually looking at podcasts by titles? I don't even think they are they?
So I do. I go through, so I use the app Castro, and I load, it auto loads new episodes of all the podcasts I like into a queue. And so then I go through the queue and I very quickly look at the titles and like the quick descriptions and decide listen or don't listen. And I delete out all the ones that aren't interesting. So for me, the best titles are the ones that are kind of funny or interesting, but also somewhat describe what's in the podcast. Unless it's a podcast, like for example, I do the weekly podcast, Tech Talk Y'all, and it's a tech news podcast. So like, the titles don't really matter for that necessarily because it's just tech news. We're going to talk about 20 different articles.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So it just is what it is. So for that, I try to make it more catchy or funny or whatever else. But in general, I think some kind of descriptive, like for example, I listened to Jay Shetty's podcast. He's the guy that wrote How to Think Like a Monk. And it's a mindfulness podcast. And so like he'll say, his title will be like a conversation with so-and-so about the nature of love. And it's like, okay, well, that's very helpful. Do I want to listen to a podcast about the nature of love or not? If I do, I leave it in the queue. And if not, it goes out the window. I think that's helpful. So,
you're talking about a marketing availability of personnel to create all these ways to share. Yeah. And when it's just me, I really got away. I don't do a description of the show. I try to put it in the title. It makes it easier on me.
It is easier.
And I figure if they want to listen, if they know me, they're probably going to want to listen to it anyway. What the intent is of the show. I think that's where I hang my hat, is that it's the intent of this show to deliver pretty much the same kind of thing. We're not changing it up at all. The number of people that listen to podcasts at least once a year and monthly in 2021, the total was 41% of U.S. people listen to podcasts.
Yeah.
Now, back that up 10 years. 2011, it was 12%.
Yeah. Yeah, the growth is astronomical.
So the medium's there. The medium's not going away. This availability of being able to create content is low dollar. It's easily done. It doesn't require a lot of logistics.
Right.
But the marketing of it, where do you find lifespan of a product? Do you see where you have to go back through and start calling stuff that's 5 years old and you're like, pull that one, pull this one, or is stuff out there forever?
Well, I mean, I think it's a question. It's all out there. I mean, I've got a podcast I did for nonprofit marketing that's still out on Spotify to this day, and it's still good content out there. But I think it really becomes a question of like, which episodes do you call attention to continually? Some are going to rise to the top. They're going to have better listenership, better engagement, better comments, or just better guests. And so for those, I think you continually drip those out on social media over time. And for the ones that maybe weren't as great, you just let them go by the wayside, and it just is what it is. And that's totally fine. And that's what I love about evergreen podcast. I mean, this conversation we're having right now, like it'll be probably relatively relevant within the next 5 years. So I'll just keep plugging away, keep promoting it. Why not? It doesn't hurt. Yeah. All right. So which brings me to my next question, which is, so podcasting's working well. What's not working? Like what in the content space? Like what do you not like?
What I don't like in our own production is the unavailability to refine content that we've already captured. What I would love to get to is to have the fidelity and the deep appreciation of content compiled, curated, and repackaged, similar to like the TED Talk, TED Radio Hour, where they'll take 2 or 3 or 4 shows covering globally and over time and pull pieces of those and repackage them with new conversations and new content and intermix these things and reuse this content. That's where I would love to get to. And plus, I would love to get to a user interface that's not just auditory. What I would love to get to, and I can't remember, who did we first sign up with? It wasn't Blueberry. It was, what was it's mostly for music, and you can leave notes within the audio.
Oh, is it SoundCloud? Is that
SoundCloud.
the one? Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, SoundCloud's awesome. As a knowledge management guy, I'm like, oh my gosh, you can leave notes and concepts within the audio track. I thought that was brilliant. Yeah. Believe me, I was the only guy promoting that idea. Yeah. And after 4 or 5 years, I was like, all right, fine. Nobody's playing. Great. All right. Because I think the user of that interface never utilized, a lot that I saw, never utilized that feature of the technology interface. Right. Yeah. So it's just strictly an audio pull for the most part. So, all right. So we went with Blueberry for the hosting and all that, and it just made my life a little easier. But what I would love to get to, like, and frame the concept like lessons learned. If you could click through audio video content, either conceptually or by manufacturer or by geography or by, slice it out in multiple ways that give the listener or the user, I'll say, an interface that makes the deeper engagement and connects more content instead of just listening to one show where out of the 21 minutes, 3 minutes talked about this concept. We have an accumulator that connects all that on the back end that gives the user the slick interface of pulling data and knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I would love to create that.
Let's go with that then. You and I will build that next week over some
it's no big deal. Yeah. It's just a little bit. It's like two lines of code.
I mean, you know that. You know people. I know people. I mean, we could probably get it done, I would think.
Yeah. I think you're right. Like content aggregation and the ability to draw out the value of it over a long period of time is just really lacking right now. And I think it's going to come a long way in the next few years, but it's going to take some time for the technology to catch up with that medium for sure.
Well, I'm sure the medium, I think that probably is out there, but it's in somebody's deep pocket organization that has the money to build these widgets. Yeah. As far as, publicly available or low cost, hopefully we can get that done. Because I think there are a lot of nonprofits out there. Going back to what I've learned as running a nonprofit, marketing of your own nonprofit is like the last thing that gets done.
It is.
Now from your perspective and how we met with 48 and 48, right? That idea that was like the last thing they worked on, and that was like the first thing people saw, was like the biggest black eye for marketing ever. Yeah. So push that forward. How much more can an organization be able to self-generate and tell their own story in a good way? And I think podcasting is probably the easiest way to do that.
It is.
But here again, I've seen it where organizations build this wheel and nobody listens because they don't
promote it. Yeah. I mean, if you put out a podcast and then you don't talk about it anywhere, then why would you even do it? Like, what's even that's like having a blog. Let's say starting a blog and be like, I'm gonna publish all this great content, but I'm not ever gonna tell anybody the URL. Like, it's a secret. It's a secret blog. It's my secret blog. So it's my secret podcast. There's no need to promote it. It's fine. It's gonna be great. So
it's good.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about channels for a second. So what channels are you seeing traction on? I mean, podcast related, social related, promoting the podcast related. Like, what channels do you focus on?
One of the failed attempts was Facebook, because, and I say that because Facebook did this whole thing about helping nonprofits about, 2-3 years ago. And I really thought, oh, geez, this is great. They did all this outreach to nonprofits and we got signed up for all these things. And at that point, I could publish a podcast and it would populate to our Facebook page. Well, since then, that has stopped. The nonprofiteer centric, I think, has pretty much stopped, or I quit listening, one of those. But it didn't really add much value. And I just changed our tagline because I said, I would always say, join a conversation on Facebook. Well, nobody ever did. And the numbers never changed. And I was like, well, scratch that. So that's not working for what we're doing. There are a lot of marketing things specifically for nonprofits that are out there that are, I think it's Candid is one of the programs that kind of a Better Business Bureau of nonprofits, if you will. Yeah. And so I publish and push things there. LinkedIn is my easy one. I mean, LinkedIn is just regular everyday business. I do everything pretty much on LinkedIn.
Right.
And a little bit on Twitter, not too much anymore. But so that's it. Right? You know, I'm at a saturation point. It's like, I'm just
double down on like one or two things, then everything else.
And that's all I do. You know, that's all I got time for.
Yeah.
If I had a social media person or a marketing person, then that would be a whole different story. But
yeah. I mean, but I think that's smart, right? Like you only have so much margin. There's so many channels. Focus on one or two that you know you can make an impact on, and just do that only and nothing else. Yeah. And I'll tell you, I mean, just if I'm being just confessing here,
sure, I'm
pretty terrible about managing my own personal social media. I don't even I don't even log into Facebook at all. I got an invite the other day to a really important family member's birthday party, and it was through Facebook. I just happened to randomly see it. And I'm like, well, it's a good thing I saw this, because I would have I would have gone weeks and missed it entirely. So you can only do what you can do. So, yeah.
Well, you bring up a good point there. Who's the user of each system? Well, who's the user of each channel?
Yeah, that's right.
And if you don't know your user to begin with, then it's a scattergun approach and you just try everything.
That's right.
But if you've got an idea, whatever the most recent one, you know, I refuse to do TikTok. I just refuse to even load it on my phone.
I'm telling you right now, TikTok is great. It is great for publishing content. You can get so many views so easily. The metrics are insane. I'm just telling you right now. So
I got that. I hear you. You know, if I had time and interest to learn something different, that's the problem. Is that there is a point where it's like, you know what? I'm going to stick with these just because I've got it down to a science.
Yeah.
But
I
know TikTok is probably I mean, what's next? Well, I mean, TikTok's been riding high for 5 years, 6 years?
Yeah.
What's next? So that's the other thing to this is you constantly got to be reinventing. Yeah.
What's that? Well, I'll tell you what I like about TikTok, and then I'm going to ask you my last question. So what I like about TikTok is it focuses on content discovery in a way that no other platform does. So on LinkedIn, you're seeing stuff from the people you follow and your friends. On Facebook, you're seeing your friends. On Instagram, you're seeing the things you follow. Now on Reels in Instagram, they do a little bit of content, new content discovery, but not like TikTok. TikTok is wild. As I flip through videos from my homepage, it's some of my friends' stuff, but it's mostly just totally new videos, and it figures out what I like and just shows me more of that. And it's content discovery at its finest, and that's what makes it such a powerhouse. So for what it's worth, if you want to get on.
Yeah, no, it's a smart way to say it too.
All right, so last question: if you had to focus on one thing for the next year related to content, what one thing would you focus on?
Designing and building an intra-organizational design of knowledge development. And by that, I mean, similar to a lessons learned organization. Mm-hmm. So this is an internal market. So let's reframe that. So I'm not saying just mass marketing. So this idea is to market knowledge within an organization, to create a knowledge exchange where the organization as a culture behaves and sharing knowledge is a regular thing.
Yeah.
That they're not holding on to knowledge to somehow represent power. Or
you mean knowledge gets caught up in silos inside of organizations? I don't know what you're talking about. Could that happen? Is that even possible?
I know the state of Georgia has nothing like that. And you've probably never seen anything like that. And it's like a story time.
Yeah.
It's like, what is you saying? I don't understand. But what's funny is that in this nonprofit work, knowledge management, and that's what we do, is across every industry. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not just a type of organization problem. It is a people problem.
It is.
Because all organizations are pretty much people, and people are people.
That's right.
And until we learn better, we won't do better.
Yeah, that's right. I like that. Until we learn better, we won't do better. All right, Edwin. Well, let me recap our conversation for a minute here, and then I'll ask you for any final thoughts, and then we'll wrap up. So, related to content marketing for what's working, you said that using some organizations use podcasts to make sales, and that is working. I've seen that work. It works. It's a networking approach, and it's a soft sell, but it does work. Your goal, however, with your podcast is to enrich knowledge and to share knowledge. And usually that's my goal as well. I try to interview interesting people that can share their knowledge so we can all grow together. You mentioned that ROI is difficult. Listens are probably not the best metric. And we talked about how social engagement from content we create from our podcast is probably a better metric, and then traffic driven back to website. For what's not working, you said the inability to refine content that's already been captured. So we lack the ability to take evergreen content that's buried inside of so many different areas of our organization and repurpose that into content that really matters and can help drive us forward, which is a really thoughtful and insightful statement. For what channels you said you're focused on, you said Facebook was a failed attempt. And frankly, that has been my perspective for quite some time. But LinkedIn is easy. And I agree. LinkedIn has been on the rise. Facebook has been on the decline. And for focus, you said an inter-organizational knowledge development platform where you can take knowledge from within the organization and make it accessible to other people, which is, of course, the thing that you do and what you spend all of your time on, which is a worthy effort. Do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share?
If you're looking to create podcasts, consider your host or your MC or whoever's behind the mic, who's going to be your El Questionnaire person, and think of how they sound. Regardless of the CV or the subject matter expertise or years in the company or et cetera, listen to them. And if they are not conversational to begin with, they're not going to get more conversational on a microphone.
It's true.
That's my advice.
That's good advice. That's good advice. That's good advice. Well, you're a good It's funny when you're driving, and you did this a little with the first question, which was great. Like you started just asking questions. You ask great questions, which I love. So I appreciate that about you. And thank you, man. Thanks for joining us on the show today. I really enjoyed it.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to Get a Word In, brought to you by Edgewise.media, a podcast-first marketing content agency. To learn more about Edgewise, visit www.edgewise.media. I'm your host, Adam Walker. To connect with me, check out my blog at adamjwalker.com. Thanks for listening, and make sure to subscribe now so you don't miss our next great conversation about content marketing.